My name's Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face, and Face to Face is broadcast every single week at AccessTV.org studios in downtown Hartford. Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask my guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning on Face to Face, I have an international expert. We're going to cover many international issues throughout the world, which is going to bring us back into part two towards the security of the United States. My guest has been on my other show, All About You, last year, and I'm pleased to have him on this show, Face to Face, this year. My guest is no other than Dr. Physician. He is the mayor of South Windsor, Dr. Saud Anwar. Good morning, Dr. Anwar.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me. I'm glad to be here this morning.
Okay, it's a pleasure to have you on this program. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to cover a lot of serious international issues. Let's start off, first of all, with the seriousness of ISIS. What type of organization of terrorists or whatever you want to classify ISIS consists of?
Sure. First, I want to thank you for having this important conversation this morning, because I think we as a society do not spend enough time on international issues. We do not spend enough time on our foreign policy, because that has an impact on each and every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of the previous wars is actually about $4 trillion.
Yes.
And I think the fact that we have disengaged as a society about what policies we are making is part of the problem that we have to try and tackle. So I'm so glad that we are having this conversation this morning, because this is something that everyone should have this conversation in their homes and have a better understanding about our foreign policy and our strategies. So coming to your question, ISIS, again, there is no simple way to put it. They are one of the most evil group of people that we have seen in the recent history. They are brutal, they are hate-based, they are against anything and everything any faith would stand for. It is actually, they are as related to the faith of Islam as KKK or as the Nazis would be related to Christianity.
Yes.
They are actually murderers who, if you look at the people that they're murdering the most in the world right now, their number one target is Muslims.
Okay.
And that's something that our media at times does not share and does not show as much. If you look at the reporting about ISIS that goes on in the US media, the amount and the proportion of time that we spend talks more about how they are murdering journalists, how they're murdering people of Christian faith, and so on, which is important to cover.
Yes.
But proportionately, the number one target that ISIS has is murdering Muslims. And the clear example of that you can see right now is that if you look at all the refugees that are fleeing parts of the world who are being attacked by ISIS, these are Muslims who are actually trying to flee because they are the ones who are being murdered. And the number one group of people who are fighting ISIS is also Muslims. And I think that's the part that at times is not covered in a very clear manner by our media.
Dr. Anwar, first of all, is ISIS what you call true Muslim people? And the second thing is, why are they so much engaged in killing other Muslims or groups of people throughout the world?
So that's a good question. Actually, they have nothing to do with Islam, except that they use the faith. And what people do is, and this is a strategy that they have used to try and recruit people, but this is also a strategy to malign the faith. And we, whenever we give them that name, we are actually giving them more capacity and more credibility. that these are thugs, these are criminals, these are murderers, and you can give them all other names except anything to do with the faith. Now, why are they doing this? What is the capacity? We have to go back and look at the origins of how this started. Unfortunately, ISIS has been formed after United States intervention, wrongful, unethical intervention in Iraq. And then this intervention led to the Baathists and some of the people who were supporters of Saddam to go underground, and they have actually remanufactured themselves with a new theological perspective and have come back as criminals, as evil people who are trying to capture more of the region in part of the Iraq, but as they are now expanding towards Syria and Lebanon and other parts. And this is actually an organized group which is getting support, unfortunately, from some evil groups of people, even and changes from Al-Qaeda perspective, and then this Salafi Wahhabi extreme mindset that is being theologically used by some of these people, which is resulting in the murders, killing of anyone and everyone who does not believe in their way. And the fact that they actually are destroying the history, 2,000 plus year old history of the region, is clearly showing how the level of evilness and the level of terrible things that they are planning to do and they are willing to do.
Well, since ISIS was formed, started it, I guess, technically back in 1999, I hear that the numbers are close to over 250,000 total. Is that an accurate number, number one, in that percentage-wise or population-wise?
So from a percentage point of view, now, if we were to literally put all the people who are currently in the extreme groups that are contributing to the chaos in parts of the world, which I'm going to lump them all together, even though they're in different parts of the world, different regions. We look at Boko Haram, we look at ISIS, we look at Al-Qaeda, and we look at the groups that are in Somalia and part of some of Al-Shabaab groups. They come down to a 0.003% of the Muslim population in the world. Okay. I wish proportionately they were getting as much press as they are in the amount, but they get 100% of our press in the United States, whereas the overwhelming majority of the 1.6, 1.7 billion Muslims, nobody's talking about how their lives are being impacted, who they are and what they believe in, what their faith is about. And we're talking about a small minority, a nasty, evil minority. And I know bad people make good news, but then we have to put a proportionate amount to it. So I think that's the way to look at it. And one of the simplistic way I would put it for maybe your viewers is that if, God forbid, one African American does something wrong, and our news channels actually just keep showing that video of that person's wrong actions 24/7, the perception in the minds of the people who actually are just looking at that video, which is representing of a 0.001% of the community, is going to say, oh my God, everybody who looks like that is doing wrong.
Right.
And that is what is going on, unfortunately, in our media, in the way things are getting portrayed. And that is why what you're bringing to the people, what you're bringing, the honest questions and honest answers, is so valuable, so that we can actually put things in perspective and then put resources and value in perspective, and bring people better understanding in the community for each other.
Dr. Anwar, you already mentioned the role that the media is playing towards a lot of misinformation at times, and certainly not telling the whole story behind, this whole problem that exists, and, who's really responsible in the amount of numbers that actually account for the type of Muslim people that's involved. And like you mentioned, they're not really true Muslim people. They just classified it themselves as that.
Right.
But the other issue is, what role does the United States play in keeping organization like ISIS? I mean, they have to have some type of role with the policies, making this, extremist group doing, continuing to do on what they're doing. Where does the United States plays a role in this whole problem?
I think that's a very important question. Now, let's back up a little bit for a second. We have to accept and recognize that we had a role of destabilizing the region. We also had a role in disengaging from the region. We also had a role of not positively engaging in the masses and having an impact on the community. So when you actually create a vacuum and instability in an area, we have to put resources, efforts, and a civil society in that region to try and bring about a long-term sustainable change. That did not happen on our watch, when we actually caused the instability in Iraq. So that actually, the lack of stability, the lack of our investment into the region resulted in a vacuum, and that vacuum was filled by these evil people. So prior to their birth, we had a responsibility. Now they are being born and they are growing, and we have another responsibility at this time. And the important thing that we have to recognize is that our policies of trying to, and this is actually where I will use medical terminology, is that our foreign policy almost sounds schizophrenic. It's crazy. Okay, think about it, that we are fighting one group in one part of the world, and we are supporting the same group in another part of the world, and they are taking the ammunition from one part of the world where we are supporting them and taking it to the other part of the world where they're actually fighting against us. And who in the world does that? Which other part of the world does that? So what we are doing is we are using Al-Qaeda type affiliates in the Syrian region to try and fight Assad. But those people are actually taking the ammunition back to the Afghanistan side and actually fighting against us. And this is unhealthy. So we have to start to live our values. We have to start to feel that we have to take a broader responsibility of doing what is right. So we have somehow recognized that we don't like Assad. All right. So now, in order to destabilize him, we are identifying anyone and everyone who is willing to fight him. But that includes the people who actually have nothing in common with the values that we live by. And we are giving them ammunition from our tax sources, directly, indirectly, hidden ways and obvious ways, and which is actually causing the human suffering that we actually recently saw with the refugees that are actually transferring from other parts of the world, walking to parts of Europe, trying to go through boats. It's a nightmare of human suffering that is of a scale that in the recent past we have unfortunately not seen, and hopefully we never see, but we have a huge responsibility in trying to prevent the creation of this, trying to reduce the propagation, but also being responsible to take care of the human suffering that is happening. Think about it, and we should probably talk about the human suffering of what's happening in that region. And here we are, one of the richest countries in the world with some of the most resources. If we were to say that we were going to use a small proportion of our resources that we are putting in military into humanitarian efforts, we are going to change the landscape of the world. And we have that capacity. However, we are the best humanitarians in the world, but our government is not doing the humanitarian part that is so necessary at this stage.
Dr. Anwar, which United States government administration that you think was involved with some of the bad policies that contributed towards forming ISIS, number one? Number two, do you think the current president, do you think our current president of the United States right now is really on top of this issue? And would you be fair to say that the next president of the United States would have to have some real good strength areas, some strong areas in foreign affairs to be able to attack and change some of the policies that we have contributed towards this problem?
Yes. So again, excellent question, Jonathan. The first part is President Bush, when he actually went against United Nations, when he actually went with a unilateral attack on Iraq.
Which President Bush are we talking about?
President George W.
George W. Bush. Okay.
So, and then President George W. Bush was the one who actually started this whole process.
Okay.
And he was a major contributor to the creation of all the chaos that we are seeing. Okay. Now you have to recognize that he actually was a president when we were attacked in a manner that we had never been attacked before.
Yes.
And we had to respond. But taking the response from where the problem was and taking that whole war in a different direction was wrong at so many levels. And it was wrong to the people who had lost their loved ones in 9/11. It was wrong on a humanitarian basis, and it was basically attacking a region that had nothing to do with 9/11. And that resulted in all the problems that we are seeing. Now, the second component of your question is how is President Obama dealing with this? Now, President Obama came in the midst of a crisis, and that was unfortunately a manufactured crisis by our policies. And that crisis was something we had to tackle, fixing things takes a longer time than actually creating the chaos. So he has been doing a good job. Not an excellent job, but a good job to try and fix some of those things. But he also could do far better at this time on the humanitarian aspects. He has to step into the picture and make the humanitarian issue a primary issue at this time. ISIS and some of these extreme groups have no theological basis of existence. They have no moral ways of existence. They have no credibility within the people that they are living in the region where they're living and trying to impact. But at the same time, there is no counter humanitarian effort to take the oxygen away from them as much as we need to. So rather than giving ammunition and spreading it to one party or the other, our humanitarian efforts should be maximized. And that is where we win the hearts and minds of people, and we are actually able to truly make a sustainable difference. Now, these things need a long-term strategy. And then that long-term strategy is missing. And I hope in the presidential debates that we will have at some point, there is a conversation that happens on the values that we live by in America, and making sure those values are part of our policy. Think about it. We live by some values in our homes. And then we say, be nice to people. And as soon as you go to your neighbors, you yell and scream at them and throw things at them and try to make them fight, and then give one of your neighbors something to kill the neighbor next door. That is not our value in our homes. So why are we using and living by those values outside of our home? And it's a very simplistic thing. So we cannot have two levels of values and two types of values.
But is that the same comparison that you're making with the United States government? Is that we are promoting that we are a peaceful country and we want everybody to live a real peaceful life, but we're doing things on the policy level that's contracting our own personal beliefs?
I believe so. Yes, I think so, because think about it. Again, we are the best country in the world. Why? Because we live by values in our society, in our country, which are pluralistic, which are respectful, which value human life, which try to take care of our fellow citizens, fellow humans, and we do try to do the best. We are the most giving community people in the world. With respect to our policies, we could do far better to represent those values. And again, with respect to empowering bad people, with respect to supporting some of the kingdoms, some of the people who are not nice to their people that they're serving, they're supposed to serve, and empowering them, giving them more strength through American support is something that goes against our values.
Dr. Anwar, we're up on our first break. It's been a very informative conversation that I've been having with you this morning, and we're going to continue very shortly with part two of all of face-to-face. I actually got to be careful, and hopefully people can learn a lot about this particular program that we are discussing this morning.
Thank you.
All right. This is Jonathan Small. I am enjoying and learning a lot this morning on a special edition. Happy Labor's Day also of our Face to Face. And we're going to come right back very shortly with part two of this program. Thank you.
I know what it's like to lose a father to gun violence and to be raised by a single mother. I know what it's like to be homeless or to go to bed hungry. I know this because this is what happened to me. I'm Hartford Mayor Pedro Seguera. Education is what lifted me out of poverty. It's why as mayor, I've made education one of my top priorities, invested hundreds of millions of dollars renovating and rebuilding schools. We're also creating more early education programs, summer youth programs, and allocating funding for mentoring programs like My Brother's Keeper. I'm Pedro Seguera. I'm asking for your vote on September the 16th to continue moving Hartford forward. I'm Pedro Segarra, and I approve this message.
I would have it no other way. Hey, now. Ooh. Hi, this is Wormbeast, and you're watching Access TV. Don't touch it, dial. Only you.
Paul Montanari from Weathersfield, and I support Mayor Pedro Segarra because we have had the nice opportunity to work together on several projects, and I have a lot of respect for his thinking, his commitment to his community. Kennedy said, you know, success has many fathers. So the city of Hartford is now coming alive again. You're seeing what's happening right down here on Front Street. Things are starting to happen. So when Hartford was struggling along about 10 years ago, it was tough to get people to come out and take leadership. Now he's taking the leadership and bringing the city back. It's starting to see the wave. That's when you see all the people come out and say, okay, I want to be a part of that action. So I'm not surprised, but I think he'll do quite well. I think he'll hold up just fine.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small. I'm hosting Face to Face this morning with my very special guest, Dr. Saud Anwar, and he's also the mayor of South Windsor. And we're going to continue back with part 2 of Face to Face. This has been a very informative conversation. And sometime when you take the average United States resident, starting with this country, it's kind of somewhat you have to be on top of your issues to stay informative about, you know, the complexity of foreign policies that exist. Is this scenario that we find ourselves in here in the United States so complex that it's very hard for the average citizen to really know what to do about this particular problem?
Yes. So again, if you have to, the way I look at it is that the American people are blessed, like people in many other parts of the world, that they make the best decisions.
Yes.
However, they make the best decisions with the information that they're provided.
Right.
And then that's where the problem lies. Because the information with respect to the foreign policy, our source of information most of the time is usually a few websites and then also a few television channels. And as a result of that, the people get a skewed view, and then they actually start to believe some of the aspects or the proportion of the time that is spent on those aspects as a broader policy decisions that the government makes. Now, we have to realize that whenever a policy is made, there are people who are promoting that policy. So sometimes there are industries who benefit from wars.
Yes.
There are industries who actually make tons and tons of money when we actually go to war at different levels, when we put boots on the ground, when we actually have specific type of tanks or aircrafts and so on. That actually results in a lot of new job creation in parts of our country. And it is important that we try and do the right thing for humanity rather than for some industries. And when those industries are at times linked closely with the sources of information that is the media, then it's a tricky challenge, because then the source of information that people are getting is also getting from the people who are benefiting from certain type of news and creating certain type of narratives that result in policies which create jobs in some areas, which is interesting perspective. But I think in the long-term interest of our country and the long-term interest of humanity, we need to have accurate, appropriate, proportional information about what's going on and make the best choices, because our policies have an impact on the suffering, not only in our own communities, but across the world.
Well, Dr. Anwar, as you just mentioned, the media has a critical role in giving the average citizens the type of information that they need to make the right decision towards whatever they want to advocate towards. And that sounds like that's just as important as the policies that the United States are also contributing towards in this problem. One other area that we talked briefly about was that the media always paints the picture that the Muslims are attacking Christians, you know, that they have this hatefulness towards anybody that's a Christian. Is that an accurate picture? Because that's what the media always seems to promote.
Yeah, actually, so this is what is going on. Again, like I said, was that ISIS, take that example we talked about. ISIS is murdering more Muslims than anybody else. Al-Qaeda's #1 target has been Muslims. So, and that part of that narrative and the story and the reality is actually never mentioned in our media.
Yes.
But they also are murdering anybody and everybody else. So anybody who's preserving history, anybody of any different faith, they're murdering each and every person that they can come across who does not believe the way they believe, who do not look at the world in the way they look at it from their narrow evil perspective. So, and I think that's the area where they actually are murdering Christians as well. And as a result, they are not good people. And when they're murdering Christians, if we are showing that on the media, that gives a perspective that, oh, the Muslims are killing Christians. Where these people are not Muslims, they're evil people, but they're also killing more Muslims than they're killing anybody else of any other faith. So people in the United States, people in the world, the Christians have to recognize that. The stories that are coming in other parts of the world that I actually sometimes get to hear and see is that when people are trying to attack a church, a place of worship, of our Christian brothers and sisters in other parts of the world, the Muslims are actually creating human chains around to protect them and fight for them. And I think that's the part of the story that actually does not come in the US as it needs to. And I think that's a missing link here. Let's look at the faith itself. In the Quran, from the Muslim faith, it is mentioned very clearly that if you ever come across a situation when you see that a Christian or a Jew is not allowed to pray in the places of worship, like a church or a synagogue, by any group, you actually have to stand up and fight them who's not letting the people pray in their places of worship.
Yes.
So it's a responsibility of a Muslim to actually make sure that their Christian and Jewish brothers are allowed to pray in their places of worship and be able to practice their faiths with complete comfort. It's clear, black and white. The other thing that the Quran also mentions in a very clear fashion is that that the people of the book, the people who are the Christians and the Jews, they do not have to worry about their future after the world and after they pass on, because God will take care of them because of the fact that God has love and respect and understanding for the people who believe in the oneness and also in doing the righteous things. So that's very clear in the book. And now these people who are using the faith, they're not even know the very basic tenets of the faith.
Well, first of all, Dr. Anwar, again, you want to mention that these extremists and ISIS, these are not true Muslim people. They just are using that name to classify themselves as Muslims.
Yes.
The second part is that even though we hear stories, and again, these are extremist people doing deadly things. I mean, child gang rapes, beheading people, it could be civilians at times. Aid workers are being also attacked. Small percentage, but still, that's a devastating problem. It's almost like you can make a similar comparison in the United States when a person with a mental illness problem goes into a church in Charleston, South Carolina, kills people while they're worshiping. That's not the real reflection of our everyday citizen. We don't do those type of things. I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's the best example, but sometimes the people need to understand that this group that we're talking about is not true Muslim people that are doing these type of activities.
Right. I think it's a fair example. Even a better example would be, God forbid, of school shootings.
Yes.
So that is a tragedy of our society, but that is not representative of our society. So what I end up seeing when I'm in my travels to other parts of the world is that people actually talk about that, because just like we are selecting information to project in our part of the world of the negative information of other parts of the world, people in other parts of the world are only taking the negative things that are happening in our societies and projecting that. So when you go to other parts of the world and have conversations, people are talking about, oh my God, don't send children to schools because it's a dangerous place, and you're putting your kids and other kids at risk by sending them to school, because that's the only story that they get. And that is not representative of that.
Right.
The other story that they get is that, well, if you are a person of a minority and you are actually walking in any part of the country, you're going to be attacked and you're going to be killed and you're going to be impacted. And that's not true. It's West, we have had some very bad incidents, and we have to address those.
Yes.
But that is a minority of the problem in the larger picture. And if we keep that perspective, we have to then creates a sort of a paranoia in the society. But in other parts of the world, people are exploiting that part of the news and putting that as the main issue about America. where while it is a big issue, it is not as big as it is portrayed out to be in other parts of the world.
Dr. Anwar, there's another side to this problem too, that you hear that ISIS is trying to recruit within the United States. I don't know what the numbers consist of, but also there's another problem is what is the overall safety and the security of the United States with a group like ISIS? I mean, is there another terrorist attack that is in place to happen, or is it just a matter of time? I mean, what's this whole process with our overall security in the United States?
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm so glad you're asking these very important questions. I think this is a very important question. So with respect to their recruitment, one person is too many.
Right.
So the fact that we need to, in our minds, in our plans, in our strategies, have to have a way to not even allow them to be able to get into any home, any household, indirectly or directly, is going to be our responsibility as a society. And now think about this with the internet and with the technology right now. The ISIS and some of their support systems are very sophisticated with respect to their efforts to try and recruit and change the minds of young people in our country, in our society. And we have actually seen that.
Yes.
We have seen that in Europe far more than United States. And I strongly believe one person recruited by these people is too many. So what we need to do is that there has to be an individual responsibility, there has to be a family responsibility, there has to be a community responsibility, and there has to be a federal or a policy-wide responsibility on this. From the individual responsibility, we have to recognize who they are, what they are, and how evil they are, and it needs to be very well recognized by individuals. We also have to recognize that they're very sophisticated because they use some of the bad policies that we have made to try and use that to recruit individuals and talk about how those policies have had an impact on the people in other parts of the world. So there's legitimate concerns that people have, but those legitimate concerns should not lead to an illegitimate actions, an illegitimate recruitment. And that's where the family role has to come. So just like every family in their homes in the evening or early morning in the breakfast or dinner have conversations about cigarettes, alcohol, drugs with their children, they also have to have a conversation about internet and the dangers of internet. Just like these child predators that are there on the internet, there are these extremist recruitment predators out in the internet as well. Interacting with people that you don't know, interacting with the people in chat rooms, interacting with people who are trying to talk about the wrong actions and policies that we have made is nobody's business. You talk to the people and interact with the people that you know, and that you can actually interact and know in person and have a respect and have an adult present in that room and those conversations. Going into these places in chat rooms and having these conversations about our policies is not healthy, not right, and is being used by people to recruit. So that family has to put their understanding down very clearly about that aspect. And then these websites and these groups that are being created left and right in other parts of the world, and we have to actually have a government clampdown on these. That is going to be a policy issue that has to be looked at. And this is a serious issue because we do not want anybody to be able to have negative views about our society, about our country. We actually have a positive engagement. And we, both of us and others in the community, do not agree with all the policies that we make. Whether it's local, whether it's statewide, whether it's national. But there's a mechanism to deal with this and address this. And that is where our opportunity is. That is where our opportunity is to try and engage with our government and make them understand the better policy decisions, but not do it in a manner which is harmful to any being whatsoever that may be. And that's, I think, what is important. So I'm so glad you asked this question.
Well, Dr. Anwar, first of all, it sounds like some of the facts that you just mentioned, even with the internet, is making the United States kind of vulnerable to having people be able to share information, to be able to recruit people, to be able to join into this extremist group like ISIS. The second area that I kind of want to get an answer, the best that you can give me an answer, is what type of attack do you think ISIS is looking to do to the United States?
I think these people want to hurt us in any shape or form that they can.
Okay.
And so ISIS. Let's back up a little bit. ISIS, and then these outfits keep changing their agendas and strategies, but ISIS has been more focused on Syria and Lebanon and Iraq.
Yeah.
And they have not been focused on the United States or Israel or any other country.
Okay.
But Al-Qaeda is another entity which is much more broader with focus on U.S. interests.
Yes.
So now there's a big overlap and interaction, and the people within these move across to one group or the other. So that is the part of the overlap that we have to be concerned about. But Al-Qaeda is the one who has stated position is to hurt us, and planned strategy is to hurt us, and they are the ones who actually have hurt us and attacked us. So that particular group and their affiliates, and we'll put them in loose category right now,
right?
But because of the fact that they interact with each other, they have relations and so on. But the way they want to do it is to try and get to our areas of interest in other parts of the world, which is going to be much more easily accessible to them, like our embassies and places like that, God forbid, and our people of the United States who are there in other parts of the world, whether they are doing humanitarian work and so on. So that's one of the targets that they try to look at. Within our country here, their interests are to try and create problems and challenges for us, whether they are based through internet attacks, hacking our systems, impacting some of those. That's one way they would try to, God forbid, hurt us. And also trying to recruit individuals to do some wrong actions is another way that they're trying to hurt us. And that is why the communities, the society, the law enforcement, and the Muslim community have to work hand in hand. And that is an area of opportunity that we need to strengthen. So I try to work and do my share to bring our law enforcement and the community together, so we start to understand each other, respect each other, and look at the collective responsibility we have to make sure our society and our community is strong. And we have to have the comfort level with each other. When we see something is not right, we actually can comfortably pick up the phone and say, you know what, I'm worried about a certain aspect of somebody, and then you're able to have that conversation in a comfortable manner. So that's part of the solution to it. But I think we have to get into the minds of these evil people to know that they are going to do whatever it takes to try and hurt us in one way or the other. And that's why we have to be ahead of them. And in order to be ahead of them, we have to recognize that everybody is on one side, including the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, and the Americans, the African Americans, the Latinos, and white Americans. Everybody's on one side. And these evil people are on the other side. And when we marginalize the Muslim community, you're actually doing a counterproductive activity to protect our society. And I think that's what some of these extremist groups within the Christian community or the Islamophobic groups that are there, they're actually trying to marginalize the Muslim community, and that's counterproductive to protecting our society.
And again, there's a difference between ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We're not talking about the exact same extremist group.
Right.
And you said the United States, I guess Al-Qaeda is the most serious threat to the United States right now, in your opinion?
These are the groups which have stated positions and actions historically and currently to try and hurt us. But you have to recognize that their workforce, for lack of a better word, is actually interchanging with ISIS and some of the other groups. So these people are sometimes working for both organizations and both groups. So I would be worried about Al-Qaeda, but ISIS so far has been focused on the region that they are trying to change and impact. That indirectly has an impact on us.
True, yes, it does. And again, nothing should be left out. If Al-Qaeda particularly could destroy the White House, kill the president, kill Congress, they would be very pleased with that in our results. Because the Pentagon was also looked at in the 9/11 attack as well.
They are evil people.
Evil people, right.
And they want to hurt us. And it is our responsibility to protect each and every citizen, each and every institution that we have, and do whatever it takes to protect ourselves. The proportion of that threat has to be looked at as well. Again, now I'll wear the hat of my physician hat. A few weeks ago, or actually almost every week, I see a young child die of drug overdose. and right here in our community in Hartford and some of these regions, and including our Manchester, Rockville, South Windsor, Tolland, Hartford, all of these regions, there are children who are dying from drugs.
Every week, you said?
Almost.
Almost every,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and these are heroin overdose, cocaine overdose, and some of these other things that are impacting them. So as opposed to the proportionate amount of threat that there is from these people, yes, we have to have intelligence, yes, we have to have those, but we cannot take the limited resources away from the battle and the war that we have in our communities right now to put it into this war on terror.
Right.
Because guess what? I'm seeing children die from this war that we should have against drugs.
Drugs, right.
And if you're going to take those resources and put this against a threat where the likelihood from somebody who is of Muslim faith, who is, God forbid, going to hurt United States, is close to being hit by lightning, that's a probability risk that if you look at. If that is the probability of somebody in the United States being killed by a Muslim who has extremist views and terrorist views, is close to being hit by lightning. And we take those resources from that hit of lightning, from the thing that is really breathing down our necks, impacting our children every single day, then we are doing something wrong.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end this particular program. I know you probably have a lot more that you would like to address, but you definitely covered a lot this morning. Is there any last words you would like people to know about this particular issue, or are you pretty much set?
No, I think that this is important. First of all, I think people need to have these conversations.
Yes.
So I want to applaud you for having this conversation. Whatever we do in other parts of the world with our tax dollars is our responsibility. And we have to make sure that the values that we live by in our homes, in our community, are represented by our government.
Right.
Second part is that the Muslims are our allies. The Muslims in the United States are our number one ally against this situation. When they're recruiting people, their number one way of recruiting people is how Muslims are treated in the United States. For anybody to try and spread hate against Islam, hate against any faith group, any community, is counterproductive to this concern that we have about extremism and so on. Our coverage of any issue should be proportional of its concern in the society. When we take things out of proportion, then we are putting a destabilization of resources into our society, and the resources are limited. And again, it's a collective responsibility for us as a community to be a role model for the rest of the world, what pluralism is, acceptance is, respect is, and also be involved in the humanitarian efforts in other parts of the world and in our own communities. Unless we do that, we actually are going to be at a disadvantage on the moral part of this war, the collective leadership that we have in the world, and that is requiring us to actually step outside of our comfort zones, interact with the people, ask those critical questions of our leaders, ask those critical questions of the community leaders as well, and then the politicians, and come up with solutions and values that we live by in each and every one of our homes and places of worship.
Well, I got to be honest, up until this point, I would say this is the most important show that I've done on Face to Face. Could even be all about you combined, because I've learned a lot. I hope I can learn some more. I hope the viewers were able to learn a lot about this particular issue that we're dealing with here throughout the world. And I felt you was the best person to give up actually your major holiday. I know you're a very busy person. You work very hard. And I really appreciate you coming down this morning on Labor Day to be my special guest on Face to Face.
It's my honor. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. Again, this is Jonathan Small. I had enjoyed hosting Face to Face this morning on Labor Day. It was a very interesting, informative program. I hope people were able to learn something about this particular issue and this particular topic. And I guess there's not going to be many other programs today on Labor Day from what I was told, but there could be other programs. But if not, I look forward to seeing you this upcoming Wednesday on All About You. And until I see you again, have a very peaceful day. Thank you.